And now, from beyond our dimension, this is the JeffMara podcast. Here's Jeff.
My guest is Jerry Sargeant, transformational expert whose spiritual awakening was due to a close encounter with death, which we're going to learn about and more. Jerry, thank you for joining me and welcome.
Hi, Jeff. It's an absolute pleasure to be here, and just thank you for having me on the show.
Well, Jerry, if you don't mind, let's first talk about that close encounter, and perhaps we can start on the day that it happened.
Yeah, I was with my ex-wife and children in a taxi, and we were driving to Bucharest airport through the countryside in Romania, and I was asleep in the taxi, and I just heard a loud crash, bang. There's glass everywhere, there's wind, the car's swaying from side to side, and I just remember thinking to myself, boy, we're in a bad accident. We're either going to hit the oncoming traffic or the car's going to flip over. And then all of a sudden we came to a stop and there was no other cars on the road. It was just getting daylight. And I was thinking, this is really strange. What's going on? I looked at the taxi driver next to me and he looked petrified. I looked behind our daughter, Alea. She was underneath the driver's seat. There was no seatbelts in the cab. And Laura, my ex-wife, had Josh, our son, in her arms, and both their mouths are full of glass. And there was a big hole in the windscreen. And there was blood dripping down my face as well. But I wasn't bleeding. So I was like, this is really weird. So I got out of the car. I looked about 30 meters back up the road, and there were two ladies lying on the side of the road. And then about another 100 meters up the road, there was what looked like a dead body. And what had happened is three ladies were crossing the road in the morning. And the first one came through the windscreen, smashed me in the face whilst I was asleep, got flipped over the car and died. Second one had her ankles cut clean off. And the third one was physically okay. I checked on the missus and kids, and then walked past the lady with her ankles cut off, and they were both screaming. And a guy had come out from a nearby factory, and I thought, there's nothing I can really do. I was just kind of fixated on what looked like a dead body up the road. I got closer and closer, got within about 10 meters, and I see this energy just hovering above the body. And I'd never seen anything like it. I didn't believe in God, infinite intelligence, the universe. Like, up until this point in my life, I thought all this stuff was for crazy, weird, strange people. You know, I had no kind of I wasn't in that direction at all. And so I'm shaking my head, like trying to get this thing out of my head, but a little bit curious at the same time. And I get closer and closer, and this energy, which was the lady's soul, just fizzles off into the ether. By that time, I'm looking down at the lady's body, and her legs are wrapped up over her head. She's completely mangled. And it was like someone had taken an old car to the scrap heap. Like, whatever was inside the body, this energy, this frequency, this soul, it had gone. There was no love lost. It was like, right, it's time for me to go. And I remember just looking up and just saying, thank you. And I don't drink whiskey and I don't smoke cigarettes, but I really felt like a whiskey and a cigarette. It was the first thing that I thought. It felt like a time to celebrate. It was kind of strange. And it was like someone had taken an old car to the scrap heap, and there was this complete separation. And this kind of woke me up. It was like this kind of like smack around the face from the universe to say, hey, Jerry, you know, we're so much more than these physical beings. You need to wake up. You need to change your life, because up until this point, my life was very different. Like, now we travel the world and we train people to heal with energy, and we're building healing centers, and we're working with love and compassion and kindness. But up until this point, my life was different. So it was a huge wake-up call, and a very much needed wake-up call. And it just sent me on this whole different trajectory in my life, where I had so many different experiences. I met a lady who worked for Scotland Yard in the psychic division, who became my spiritual teacher. I had an encounter with extraterrestrials, got taken in a spacecraft. This whole kind of stream of events happened from 2004, when this happened, all the way up to 2016, when we started Star Magic. Just crazy event after crazy event. And it was just shaping and molding me and preparing me to go out into the world and teach people Star Magic.
Did you say that at first you saw some sort of energy, perhaps like a portal in the air?
No, not during this particular incident. It was just the soul. It was the energy of the soul. Like, we're on an old country road, and I'm looking down the country road, And it was like I could see the roads and the bushes and the fields, and this soul which was kind of tall. It was like a bodily shape, but with no features. It was like translucent, transparent, this kind of like invisible energy, which you could clearly see, but you could see everything beyond the other side of it as well. And it hanged around for maybe 10, 12 seconds. It was hard to tell. It was like time just stood still, and then it just kind of fizzled and disappeared. It didn't like go through a portal. It just like disappeared into the fabric of space-time, like melted, like dissolved.
At first, I thought when this just happened, you were having a out of body experience. Then, as I listened, I thought, okay, no, he actually physically got out of the car and went and looked.
Yeah, I physically got out of the car. Yeah. I mean, I've had multiple out-of-body experiences, but this was just a wake-up call. Yeah, but what was beautiful is I got to witness like this physical vessel and this energy that was inside of it, this consciousness, this essence, and it just made me realize that, we're just inside these physical avatars. We're interfacing with other humans, we're interfacing with animals, other physical beings, but ultimately we're something different. We're not a physical body. It was
So,
something beyond.
what were your spiritual and religious beliefs before all this happened?
They were non-existent, really. I think I went to church once as a kid because my mum dragged me there kicking and screaming. But I used to be a criminal. I used to smuggle drugs, guns. I was involved in lots of high-profile bank frauds, and that was my life. I was drinking drugs as a teenager. I played a lot of sports as a kid, and then I got banned from playing rugby, which I was really good at, and that's when I kind of fell into the drinking drugs. My life spiraled out of control. And then when I was around 16, 17 years old, I ended up moving to Tenerife in the Canary Islands and working for a high profile criminal organization. And yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, at the time, I loved it because I was earning lots of money. I was kind of reckless and, drinking and partying. And my whole life was that. And I never really wanted to change it. I had no inclination to want to change it. I didn't really know there was anything else outside of that. And then after this car crash, it was like my whole world did a 180. I got flipped upside down and everything changed. I went on this kind of, it was like the universe picked me up, stuck me on a roller coaster, pressed go, and then I just couldn't get off it. And I've been on it ever since.
How did your ex-wife react to the new you after all this happened?
Well, to start with, she was really happy. But then what happened is no one's ever asked me this question. This is a really interesting topic.
Mm.
So what happened is I'm like a dog with a bone. When I understand, when I get curious or I get a bit of information on something, I want to know everything about it. What actually happened around the same time as the car crash, I was um I was in my front room watching TV, and it was like a Sunday evening, and my ex-wife Laura, she comes downstairs and she's looking at me and she's petrified. And I said, what's wrong? She said, every time I close my eyes, I see all these dark images and hear all these dark voices. She said, and when I'm pushing the layer down the pushchair in the mornings, it's like something's trying to make me push the pushchair in front of the cars to try and like kill her. And I looked at her and I thought, that sounds really weird. I said, but what would you like to do about this? So she phoned her friend that was a priest, and this priest came around our house. And she was putting crosses up, she was dousing the house and all this kind of energetic stuff. And I was sat there looking at her thinking, this is like something out of the poltergeist. Anyway, she kind of calms Laura down. Laura goes to bed. And then the next day I went to see my friend. I said, listen, I said, this weird stuff happened last night. What do you make of it? He goes, you need to call this lady. So he gave me the name and a telephone number of this lady, who was kind of his spiritual guide. And she owned a past life regression business. I didn't know any of this stuff. But anyway, I phoned her up and she didn't answer. She phoned me back about an hour later and she said, what's going on? I told her and she said, where do you live? I said 316 Richmond Road, and that's the only bit of the address I gave her. And she was right the other side of England. And the phone went quiet, and she said, have you been knocking any walls down in the house? I said, well, actually, we rent the property. We've just moved in, but the previous owner has clearly built an extension. She said, yeah, you've got an angry old man in your house. I said, an angry old man. She goes, yeah, you've got an angry old man. I said, okay, let's say there is an angry old man. What are we going to do about him? She said, oh, I'll get rid of him for you. So I said, brilliant. When can you come round? She said, oh, I don't need to do that. I can do it from here. So I'm thinking, okay, this is kind of getting stranger and stranger. But anyway, I put the phone down. I went home and I spoke to Laura and I said, I know I didn't tell you I was going to do this, but I've spoke to this lady about what happened last night. And she told me there's an angry old man in the house. And Laura turned around to me and said, I know, I've seen him. So I was like, you've seen him? She goes, yeah. I said, so I thought, okay, you've got these two ladies. They've never met each other. They've got no common friends. They've never spoken. There must be some truth to this stuff. So I phoned the lady back up and I said, I don't know what you do, but I said, I've got to come and see you. So I went up to see her. I had an appointment and she did past life regression therapy. She worked for Scotland Yard in the psychic division, solving crimes and all this sort of stuff. So she became my spiritual teacher. And the first day that I went to see her, she said to me, have you got anything that you'd like to work on? Anything, that, you can't deal with? And I was scratching my head and I said to her, listen, this might sound a little bit weird, but every time I phone my family and they don't answer, I have these really crazy, vivid thoughts, like someone's broken into our house, they've tied them up, they've raped them, they've done horrible things to them, and there's blood everywhere. And I said, I phone them over and over and over, and they just don't pick up the phone. And I said, what could this be? She goes, would you like to go and have a look? So anyway, she regressed me into this past life. And I was a Saxon warrior, and I was on a boat with all the other guys, and we were packing up the boat to leave our reservation. And all the women were sort of back at camp, like maybe a few hundred meters away. And as we were packing up the boat, these people rode through on horses. They trampled on my children and they slit my wife's throat in that lifetime. But it turned out that the soul of my wife in that lifetime was the same as the soul of my wife in this lifetime, and the same with the children. So we went in and we dealt with it. She taught me how to deal with it. And I never ever had those thoughts again. And so that just got me. I was like, I need to understand more about these multidimensional realities. So I went to see her like 2 or 3 times a week for several years. We went into hundreds of past lives. We went into hundreds of lifetimes on other planets. Like the past life thing is like a human kind of construct thing. Um, when you go into your kind of galactic incarnations, I wouldn't necessarily call them past lives, even though some of them are in this construct. Many of our soul experiences are outside of the construct, or outside of this matrix, whatever you want to call it. She brought me into hundreds of them, and I had so many different experiences, and it was amazing. She taught me how to remote view, how to bring my light out of my body and travel, all sorts of interesting things. And it just changed me so much. So I was changing over and over. And at this point in my life, I was doing a lot of bank frauds, and we were stealing loads of money, like hundreds and thousands and millions from banks. And I was asking my spiritual teacher, like, is there any kind of charities that I could give some of this money to? So she was helping me send the money to Africa. And we were building water pipelines and schools and all this different infrastructure. And the people on the ground there would write back to us and say, listen, we've done this with your money and that with your money. And it made me feel amazing. And for the first time in my life, I realized that I didn't need to keep all this money for me. I didn't just need to buy useless material objects, which is what I did all the time. I was giving it to other people and people were benefiting. So this started to change me on a kind of a humanitarian level. I started to care more and love more and realize it's not just all about me. And at the same time, I was building all of these skills within the multidimensional playing fields. And my wife, she came along for the ride for a little while. And then we started Star Magic in 2016. When I started Star Magic, she went into kind of deep depression. I remember one morning, we're in the kitchen and my son Josh, I can't remember how old he was at the time, but it was still when he went to school. And I ended up pulling them out of school when they're about 9, 10 years old to homeschool them. But up until this point, he was going, and he had an argument with his mum, and it broke his mum, and his mum was on the front room floor, and her soul came out of her body. She literally died on the front room floor. She was that depressed, and she'd gone down and spiraled out that much. And so I brought her back into her body, and it happened again a couple of months later. We were walking up a hill, and she was just in deep depression mode, and she just sat down on the grass, and her soul floated out of her body. And I got it back in and brought it back round again. I didn't really want it to go in front of the kids like that, you know? So, yeah, and then maybe 6, 7 months later, we ended up parting company. The kids stayed with me. I homeschooled the children. She went and lived in Switzerland, and the kids just traveled with me, starting Star Magic, you know, helping people. And so they've got a really good background in all of these, in all of the spiritual arts, healing, everything that we're doing. And yeah, we just drifted apart. It kind of separated us because my frequency rose and hers stayed the same, and we just became like oil and water. There was no congruency anymore.
If we get back to your past lives on other planets, you speak about Bevricon. And is that one of the planets that you lived on?
A number of times. Yeah, what actually happened, I was writing a book called The Vortex of Consciousness. And this book, I learned so much writing this book about the whole universe. Um, and I was sat at my computer one day at my laptop, and I'm just tapping away, and the energy just starts to get really light, and I feel my whole body vibrating. And then all of a sudden, I just fell through my computer screen. And I was on a bridge, and I looked up and there was just sky. Because I was looking back to see where the computer was, but there was no computer. And I was on a grassy bridge, and it was several meters wide, and there was water flowing underneath it, and there was little sides to the bridge coming up. And I looked up, and there were all of these children. They had crystals in front of their foreheads, and a lot of them had no hair, some of them had hair, and they had this band of light that went from the crystal around the back of their head, and they were hovering in the empty space. They were chucking balls of energy, they were kind of moving around, levitating, and I just got up and walked towards them, and they recognized me. It was bizarre, like it was like, "Hey, how you doing?" They didn't say anything, but it was that feeling and that knowing. And I went over to the right-hand side, and there was like this big castle there. And I was told that you're on a planet called Bevricon in the constellation of Boots. It was like an Arcturian sort of stronghold, but there were multiple other races there. And as I kind of like started to understand this planet and I went and explored it, I've been back so many times to explore it. It's like a transition place where lots of extraterrestrials move through when they're changing dimensional fields, or they come for healing, or they're going from one reality field to another, which is kind of a really high one to a really low one, and the field is going to be so different. They go through these kind of like reacclimatization chambers to readjust their template so that when they go there they can, you know, mold into that energetic field and be comfortable there. So yeah, I went to this castle, and I knocked on the door, and this lady with long ginger hair all the way down to to the floor answered. And there were all these beings in her hair, and they were kind of jumping around. Her hair would fall down, the hair would turn to these little kind of pixies, they'd climb back up into her hair. She told me her name was Gian Treva, and she took me into the castle, and she showed me around. She took me to some classrooms in there where there was like wizard type beings teaching children how to open portals, how to travel through them, how to collapse space-time, how to communicate telepathically, how to move objects with their minds and their hands without touching them, like telekinesis. So I explored that castle. They showed me around healing chambers there. They showed me around their council chambers there. I mean, the planet's beautiful. I mean, it's a little bit like Earth. It's a water and mineral-based planet. And so the beings there are kind of water and mineral-based beings, but in a higher consciousness field in the fifth dimension. So yeah, and I've been back there so many times. Bevricon's amazing. I take clients there for healing. We do meditation groups there. It's an amazing, amazing planet.
Well, in the beginning, you mentioned that you have been on a UFO. Can you tell us about that?
So back in 2009, so after the car crash, which was 2004, end of 2004, um, I was with my spiritual teacher for a few years, learning and growing and remembering. And then around 2008, 2009, we moved to New Zealand. And the reason I moved there is because I came across this institute called the Matrix Institute, and they had these future maps of the world where the water mass was going to become more and the land mass was going to go under. And I looked at New Zealand and I thought, it's like quadruple the size, you know. It was like we were looking at the end of the Mayan calendar in 2012 and all of these disasters that were supposed to happen. I mean, I didn't really understand. I was very green at the time. And so I bought into it all. And I thought, okay, we need to go to New Zealand. So that's how we ended up going there. But anyway, we got to New Zealand and I met an old fella called Michael. He became a really good friend of mine. And he had a copper pyramid in his garden. And when we went to New Zealand, we set up a health and fitness center. So I was in the gym all day. And in the evening time, I would go around to Michael's house and I'd sit in his pyramid. And he taught me to meditate with my eyes open. And I had some amazing experiences in there. I mean, I'll tell you, but one of them was with extraterrestrials, but the one before that, I was meditating with my eyes open and Jesus appeared before me and my feet turned to balls of fire. And he looked at me and he said, Jerry, you can walk anywhere you want to go in this world. Just don't be frightened. No fear. And I just kind of looked at him and nodded. And then he turned and he walked up some stairs that appeared in the garden. So I brought my light out of my body and I walked up the stairs behind him. We went through a door. And as soon as we went through the door, we were like in the Last Supper. And there was all these people around the table. There was food. I looked out of the window and there was a massive extraterrestrial spacecraft. And they were showing me that ETs have been around for a long time. When I was in the Last Supper, I was Matthew, having this experience as Matthew. Anyway, I stayed for a little while, walked back down the steps into the pyramid and brought my light back into my body. A couple of weeks later, I'm meditating again with my eyes open, and this little space pod lands in the garden, and there was a blue being inside of it. And so I brought my light out of my body. I went and got in this space pod. It's the only way I can describe it. It wasn't big. You could literally fit two people or two beings inside of it. Inside, everything was made of light. So this being was kind of, I could feel, is the best way to describe it, this being thinking thoughts and controlling the spacecraft. The being's name was Derekwai, and he took my consciousness and placed it on the other side of this portal where there was a beach and there was water. And then it was like the rest of my consciousness caught up with the piece of my consciousness that he placed on the other side inside this great spacecraft. 4 or 5 seconds, we've gone through this portal and came out the other side. And then I kind of came back together again. I get out of the space pod, I walk up the beach, and there's hundreds of these blue beings. Some of them are like 6.5 foot, some of them are 7 foot, some of them are taller. They had no clothes on, they had no suits on, they had no genitals, they were androgynous. All of them like had six packs, they were like really fit and healthy. And I knew that I was on Alpha Centauri, and I knew that they were Lyrans. And they hugged me. And when they hugged me, it felt like home, like the level of love that I felt just throughout me. It was like I was just like watery tears. Like it was so emotional. And I felt like I was home with my family. And they hugged me for a little while, then they stopped and they kind of cleared away. And one of them walked up the beach and into this kind of like jungle, woody area. And I followed this being up, went through the trees, and then we came out the other side of the trees and there was like a pyramid and it was made of light. It was huge. And they took me inside. And when I went inside, there was like, the only way I can describe it is like meeting like a Lyran chief. Like imagine you went to a native reservation and you met an old chief. It was like meeting a really ancient Lyran. You could tell this being was really old, like hundreds or thousands of years old. And the being asked me to kneel on the floor. So I knelt down on the floor and all of this orange light started pouring down through my crown. And it had all of this geometrical coding, but it's not like the geometry that you get here on Earth. It had no solid sides. It was like this fluid, ever flowing, ever moving, intersecting geometry. And it was flowing down into my body. And I don't know how long I was there for. It could have been 10 minutes. It could have been hours. I really don't know. But they picked me up when the download finished, one under here and one under here. And they kind of frog marched me back to the space pod. I went inside. They flew me back through the portal, back into the garden. I got back into my body. And that was my first kind of experience that I was kind of conscious with an extraterrestrial. As my journeys unfolded, I now realized that they were coming into my dream time and trying to take me as a child too. Because I used to wake up with these really bad nightmares and I was running around the house like things were chasing me. But that's a whole other story. But this was my first kind of like conscious interaction with these beings. And then from there, nothing happened. I was waking up every day like, what's next? You know, like, oh, I really want the next piece of the puzzle. And nothing happened for about 2 years. I was getting a little bit frustrated. I kind of sort of like forgot about it. And then one morning I woke up and something just said to me, Jerry, you've got to go back to England. And I went to Laura and the kids and I said, we've got to go back to England. They were like, you're crazy. We've just got to New Zealand. We've set up a health and fitness center. We're happy in school, Dad. Anyway, after a couple of weeks, I pestered them because I just knew that I had to go back. So we put a manager in charge of the gym and we flew back to England and then everything started going into overdrive. So I was out running one morning and I see some fairies flying around a tree and I stop and I'm like, wow, there's fairies. So anyway, this angel comes down and the angel says, my name's Archangel Gabriel. You need to write a book. I said, okay, what's it called? He said, Into the Light. It's about your life journey. So anyway, I ran home, opened up my laptop, wrote this book in 4 weeks. And then after writing the book, I published it. And then I started seeing all the code in the space. And it was the same code that came in the orange download on Alpha Centauri. So I'm saying to my guides, what am I supposed to do with this stuff? They said, you need to meditate more, Jerry. You're being really lazy. So I started getting up at 5 o'clock every morning with my son, Josh. And we'd go into these 2-hour meditations and we'd go underneath the pyramids in Giza to these mystery schools. And when we're in the mystery schools, this being was coming out, a man. It was Thoth. And he was showing us these scrolls. And on these scrolls were codes, and it was the same codes in the space, the same codes in the downloads. And I realized then that Thoth was sharing with us Lyran codes. And actually, when you go back through the galactic history and you look at how when there was the Orion Wars, the Lyran Syrians, they actually became one with the Draco reptilians. They mated. They got a reptilian queen and a Lyran Syrian royal king, and they mated to create the Anunnaki. So there was these Anunnaki had reptilian DNA and Lyran Syrian DNA. So they're pretty much straight down the center, light and dark, a perfect balance of light and dark. So these codes that Thoth was sharing with me in this space were from this kind of reptilian, the codes that Thoth was sharing with me were coming from this Lyran Syrian lineage. And so he was showing me how to heal people with these codes, and also my son Josh. So we went every day for 9 months for 2 hours. And we weren't the only people in these classrooms. I was looking around, there was loads of other human beings there. And he was showing us how to heal people. Then people started coming into my life that needed healing. And I was trying it and it was working. And I was thinking to myself, you know what, this actually could be a business. Maybe I could earn money like legally for the first time in my life, like properly. So my ex-wife came into the play again during this because she came home one day and she said, Jerry, I was in the library today and this book just jumped off the shelf. She said, I started reading it, but I think you need to read it. And it was called Joe the Diviner. And it was about this Irish healer that worked in his shed at the bottom of his garden. So I read the book and I thought, well, if he can do it, I can do it. So then what I did is I booked a place at a Mind Body Spirit Festival. And there was no star magic then. I was still kind of teetering around with this stuff. I just got these little cards made up saying energy healing. I took my book into the light and I went with my daughter, Alea. And we were there for 2 days. And I made some Excel spreadsheets up and I said, listen, if you put your name down at the end of the weekend, I'm going to draw 3 names out of the hat and I'm going to give away 3 free healing sessions. About 70 or 80 people put their name down. And at the end of the weekend, I phoned them all and told them that they'd all won the prize just so I could practice. So I had like 70 or 80 people to practice on, went and practiced on these people, got some amazing results, phoned them all back up and said, listen, please, can I come to your house for a cup of tea? I'm going to bring my video camera. I'd like to get a testimonial. So I got these testimonials. And then there was one other really important piece of the puzzle before I started Star Magic. So what happened is when I moved back from New Zealand, I went to the passport office with my ex-wife. So not with my ex-wife, just with the kids to get passports for the kids. And when I went there, I got arrested. And they arrested me for conspiracy to defraud the Bank of Scotland and holding a false passport or holding a false travel document. So I was looking at a long time in prison. I was on bail, learning all of this healing stuff. And I ended up having to go to court. And I said to the universe, listen, if you get me off this court case, I promise you I'm going to dedicate my life to Star Magic. So I went into court. The judge walked out, a man, and he had his two accomplices with him. They're both female. And the one to his right and my left, she looked at me and winked, and I could see wings on her back, like an angel. I was thinking, no, my whole body went shivery, like goosebumps. And the prosecution, they gave their side of the story, and my solicitor gave our side of the story. And then they went out and deliberated, came back in 40 odd minutes later. She winked at me again, and I was like, no way. So anyway, they said, please rise, Mr. Sargeant. So I stood up and they said, listen, we can see you're a changed man. We're going to give you a 1-year conditional discharge and an £80 court fee. You're free to go. So I walked out of the court, and that was it. I knew I had to do Star Magic, and we started it in around January, February, March 2016. I can't remember exactly, but it's the beginning of 2016. Yeah, and we've not looked back since.
If we get back to talking about traveling to other planets and ETs, how are stargates, mathematics, and multidimensional travel all interconnected?
Yeah, this is an awesome question. So when we're in the mystery schools, the one thing, as well as the healing that was kind of drilled into us, was the mathematics. And so if you look at the Great Pyramid on Giza, um, it's it's like a big computer system. It's also like it's like a spaceship. So if you wanted to get off planet Earth in a space rocket and you wanted to go into space, you would have to travel at 33 times the speed of sound, which is Mach 33, which is a 11.2 kilometers per second. And 11.2, if you add 11 and 2 together, you get 13. Okay, this number 13 is so important. We have in our hearts the God spark. It's a multi-dimensional Merkaba field. And a multi-dimensional Merkaba field is 10 tetrahedrons. And those 10 tetrahedrons make a 12-pointed star. And when those tetrahedrons spin, they create a sphere. And that sphere that houses the 12 points is the number 13, which plugs into your heart, which gives you access to pretty much everywhere. Now, there are 13 stargates. There are 13 DNA strands. A lot of people say, well, there's a 12-strand template. People say there's 12 stargates on the planet, 12 universal, 12 galactic stargates. But actually, the 12 are always encompassed by the sphere, the 13th. If you look at the realms, there are realms in this kind of construct that we live in. There are 12 realms in this construct, and the 12 realms are made from 12 gigantic spheres that all emanate from the original source point. Now, there's a very specific kind of code, which is R44 RX3. Okay, and I was given this in the mystery schools. When you use the code R44RX3 and you break the numerology of that down, it breaks down to 53, which is 8, which is a stargate. Now, if you go into the Giza pyramid, okay, and you look at the length, the width and the height of the king's chamber, you've got 5.24 meters by 10.48 meters by 5.33 meters, which is 11, 11, 13. If you add 11, 11, and 13 together, you get 35. 35 breaks down to 8. Now, this R44 RX3 code, when you place it into an octahedron and you place it multidimensionally in the palm of your hand, if you bring the hologram of a human being up in front of you, which is like an empty vessel, when we do healing at distance, You could be in America, Texas, I could be here in Mexico, and I could say, right, here is a hologram of Jeff. Okay, so this hologram now gets entangled with you. Now, whatever I do to that hologram is going to happen to you in real time. So what I do is I take the octahedron and the code, it charges the octahedron. What happens is a beam of light comes out in between the feet of whoever I'm working on. 18 spokes of light come out from that main light between their feet, and then another 18 spokes of light go into their heart. Now, what happens is the platonic solids appear, 5 geometries. And what happens is you place the platonic solids inside of each other in a very specific format, push it down into the human being or the person's heart. And what it does, it activates them. It activates the multidimensional Merkaba field. 12 streams of light come out from it and plug into a multidimensional Merkaba field around their physical body. They all start to spin. Then what happens is the heart, which is a cubed shape in a lower density space, switches to a dodecahedron, which is 12 sides. The 12 sides in the new 5th dimensional heart plug into the multidimensional Merkaba field. Light comes back into the heart, up into the alpha transmission center, up above the stellar gateway, then goes all the way back down into Mother Earth's heart. And it connects with the God seed atom in the center of Mother Earth's heart, which is 12 spheres, which is the whole kind of construct, the template. Now, once that happens, it connects to the Earth and it connects to Giza. And Giza, the pyramids, if you blow it up 43,200 times, it equals the exact circumference of the Earth. So 432 is a resonance healing frequency. So what happens is that harmonic gets pulled back into Mother Earth's heart, shot back up into the human being. And then this multidimensional Merkaba field starts to spin. The toroidal field, it kicks into gear, flowing out the top of the head, back in underneath through the root. Now, when you go into the Giza pyramid and you go into the king's chamber with this fully activated, okay, the walls of the king's chamber, they disappear. Because on the walls of the king's chamber, you've got the 13 constellations, okay, which link into the 13 constellations in our zodiac, okay, which plug into the 13 stargates, which plug into the 13 points on the multidimensional Merkaba field. All of this stuff interlinks. The reason I know this is because 2 years ago, I hired the whole Giza pyramid for myself on my birthday. And I went in the dark for several hours just on my own. I went into the king's chamber and I ran myself through this sequence of events. And all of the walls disappeared in the king's chamber. They all lit up orange. And then all of these beings came into the space. And I don't really get scared, but this is one of those moments I had to really breathe deeply and say, you got this, Jerry. You know, it was kind of a bit out there. What happened is the whole king's chamber turned into a gateway. And what happened is my light came out of my body and I went through this very specific bend in space-time. We call it the Ark of the Covenant. So the Ark of the Covenant was also a device to fire up the king's chamber to produce electrical energy, but it's also a bend in space-time. So I got taken up through this bend in space-time and up to the God worlds. And what they were doing is showing me how you take your physical body out from the construct through these gateways. So I went up into the God worlds and I was looking back down at the whole construct, which you can actually do by taking your light out of your body and having like an out of body experience. But this is a different way of doing it, because this way is the way that you can actually take your physical body once your DNA is activated. So it's given me like a dry run of this process. So I went up, came all the way back down into my body. When I woke up, or kind of came around, my body was facing 180 degrees the other way, minus 23 degrees. So I'm not exactly sure what went down when I went through this whole process, but something activated within the pyramid and the king's chamber at that time. Now, the other thing to bring into play is if you go back through the galactic history, everything was great at the start, but then, you know, to cut a very, very long story short, everything was beautiful. The frequency was high. Everything was being constructed from God's source intelligent, the original kind of creation code. But as billions of years went on, the beings that were creating started to create from false light. And so different constructs were created, and dark and light became a thing. And something was put in place to stop consciousness falling any deeper. And one of those templates that was put in place was Metatron's cube. Metatron's cube is what this whole construct revolves around. And if you look at the Giza Plateau, it's a complete template of Metatron's cube. And Metatron's cube has 24 sides. 2 and 4 is the number of the divine feminine, which houses this construct. But the 13 spheres in Metatron's cube are actually the gateway out of the construct. A lot of people look at Metatron's cube as negative because it houses this construct. But people don't realize that in every single situation, you've got dark and light. And the same tools and the same mathematics is available to those in the light and those in the dark. How you choose to use the force is entirely up to the human being using the force, or the extraterrestrial being using the force, just like Star Wars. You've got Luke Skywalker and you've got Darth Vader. You know, both of them use the force in different ways. So to get out of this construct, you've got to go through the doorway of Metatron's cube, through the king's chamber, through the gateway, out through the Ark of the Covenant. And this is what we're relearning. This is what we're remembering. All of these ancient clues have been left in the pyramids around the world, different stone circles, different templates. All the mathematics is there. These are clues that we left for ourselves way back when, and we're just reincarnating over and over, picking up the clues that we left off. So this whole game is a mathematical construct. It's a holographic matrix that we live inside of. And we, as human beings on planet Earth, as Stargate Guardians, we're custodians of this planet. But a lot of people have fallen into the game of victimhood and have been, you know, manipulated as a child, coming out and going through the schooling system. And people just think that they're these small little humans that are here to pay their taxes and get a mortgage and live out their days just getting by. But really, we're these supersonic, super powerful superhumans that came from the stars to Earth. And we're remembering this stuff right now, Jeff. And for me, I just want to empower people to step into these codes and energies, to realign their templates so that they can be their angelic humanoid selves and remember how to communicate telepathically, travel in their Merkaba fields, use telekinesis, all of these beautiful things.
Do you think we're forced to stay in this matrix over and over again, or can we leave it if we want to?
No, we can leave. The thing is, we're disempowered. So there is like a reincarnation cycle running. So when you leave your body, like when you die, or when you transition, you come out of your body and you're supposed to get a choice. You're supposed to go wherever you want to go to. But when you get out of your body, the manipulation still continues. So other beings, because we're still in the construct, right? Even though we've come out of our body and we're in a different dimension, because the construct is 12 dimensions just in this construct. And then you move out into the primary light fields, the primary sound fields, and then God's source intelligence. So you've got 7 super universes and 3-dimensional fields in each one, just in the game that we're playing. So what was the question you just asked me again? I kind of just lost my train of thought then.
Well, I was wanting to know if we're forced to be in this matrix, or
Yeah, that was
can
it.
we
We're
leave?
forced. Yeah. Yeah, are we forced to be in here? So when you get out of your body and you transition, you're supposed to get a choice. Your soul and your light body is supposed to separate, and your light body is supposed to go through a cleansing process, and your soul is supposed to pick it up on the other side, and then you can choose where you want to go to next. You don't have to go through that cleansing process. You could just choose to incarnate somewhere else, or go back to source, or back to the multidimensional playing fields and just hang around as energy for a little while. But what happens is other beings will show us different constructs and say, listen, this is what you achieved in this lifetime. It didn't really go too well, did it? So what they do is they syntax us and bring us back down through the reincarnation cycle, back down into another body. Because when our soul comes into a physical body, we're a food source, you know, to other beings that are living amongst us, some living off planet, some living under the ground on Earth. But we're a food source. They feed off of our energy. So yes, we should have a choice, and we do have a choice, but most of us don't understand the game, so think we haven't got a choice, or we get duped into making a decision to come back down again. People say that there's karma, and that if you do bad in this reality, you've got to come back down and do it all over again. It's not actually true. Karma doesn't really exist like that. I mean, there's choice and effect, or cause and effect, not choice and effect, cause and effect. So the energy that you put out into the field is going to find you again at some point, because we're all connected. But to say that you did something bad and you're being punished for it, no, that's not true. When we leave our bodies, we should get a choice, and we do have a choice, but most people don't understand the game, and you need to understand the game before you exit your body. Otherwise, you're just going to exit and be none the wiser and get duped into coming back down.
In your past, you had a life of crime, right? So would you say that you don't have any karma built up for the things that you did before?
In my life up until now, I've done many things that I'm proud of, many things that I'm not proud of. None of the things I would change, because every single experience has helped shape and mold me into the human being that I am. And if I hadn't have gone through some of the dark and the destructive stuff, I actually wouldn't be able to be as efficient with the healing that we share with the world. I wouldn't be able to train people. I wouldn't be able to connect with so many people, because you can get a kid from the streets, a drug addict. I can connect with him or her. You could get a lawyer. You could get an accountant. You could get anyone from any kind of walk of life in between. I can connect with them because I've lived so many lives in this lifetime. And so everything that's happened has been part of my schooling, part of my learning, to be able to come out into the world and train people in star magic healing, and to facilitate what I'm facilitating on Earth. Now, at the same time, there are certain things that I've done which have created chaos and destruction in other people's realities. Okay. I'm going to give you an example. And this was the first time that I had an out of body experience. Okay. Um, so the spacecraft was me bringing my light out of my body. This experience was the first time that someone had helped me bring my light out of my body for a particular reason. Okay. So this is probably like 2006, 2007. In 2003 and 2004, I had a property business with some friends, and we made millions. And we had a big sales team, and everything was going really well. At the end of 2004, the property market took a downturn, and we couldn't provide to our clients what we'd promised them with, but they paid us loads of money. And we'd invested this money in marketing and different things. And so we didn't have the money to give them back. Now, I didn't know this until I started my spiritual journey, and I was working with my spiritual teacher. One day she gave me a book, and the book was called The Traveler, and it was about these two brothers. One of them was called Chris, but I can't remember the other one's name. But it was about these two brothers that could bring their light out of their body and go traveling, and they were being chased by the brethren, and the brethren were like the government, because these people were dangerous. So anyway, I read this book. It's a very short book. It's written by a guy called John 12 Hawks, if anyone wants to read it. It's a cool book. But anyway, I read it, and I was like, I want to do that. I know I can do that. So I phoned her up and I said, listen, I said, this book, I want to be able to travel. She goes, well, you better come round then. So I ended up booking an appointment, going around to her place where she works, and I'm sat down in front of her, and she takes me through this process. My heart rate is slowing down. My brain waves are slowing down. My heart's like, boom, it feels like it's almost hardly beating. And she guided me through this process where I stepped out of my body, and I was literally not in my body. I remember turning around, looking at my body, just kind of like slumped in the chair. And it was the most amazing experience, because I always thought that if you came out of your body, things would be different. It would feel different. But actually, everything when you come out of your body is like turbocharged. So your thoughts, your feelings, it's more real when you step outside of your body than when you're actually in your body. So I came out of my body, I'm looking around, and I just walked through the wall of this room that we were in. And I saw this old guy. He was in the spirit world. He had like a lumberjack shirt on, and he was kind of stuck in the in-between world. She told me, just leave him, go keep going. So I ended up going back to my house, and I watched my ex-wife and children. My missus, she was making dinner for the children, and I'm watching through the wall. And then when I got home later that night, I was like, "Were you making dinner for Alea and Josh earlier?" And blah blah blah. She was like, "How do you know that?" I said, "Oh, I was watching you." So anyway, I had to do that for my own confirmation to make sure that what I was seeing was real. But anyway, when I came back from the house, back to where this lady was that was my teacher, I saw these two little girls, and they had beautiful white dresses on, and they were looking at me. They were like twins, and I looked at them, and then they smiled, and they had these horrible pointed teeth, and they were freaky. And the lady said to me, "Just come back into the room. Let's get you back in your body." So I kind of left them. Anyway, I got back into my body. Coming back into my body was weird, like after being out, it was like I didn't really want to come back into my body because it was amazing being out. But anyway, I came back into my body. I kind of recalibrated, and then we went and connected with these two little girls. And it turned out that these two little girls were stuck in the in-between world. What had happened is their father was one of our investors, and he lost a load of money, and he left. He left his wife and children. So the wife, she gassed herself in the car with her two children and committed suicide because it was too traumatic. The mother had crossed over to the other side, and the two girls were stuck in this fourth dimensional space. So the fourth dimension is like the mental realm, and it's kind of where a lot of beings get stuck between the third dimension and the fifth dimension. We all come through the fourth dimension to get to the third dimension, and we all travel back through the fourth dimension to get to the fifth. When things happen quite suddenly, people get stuck. The energy signatures, the souls of the people that pass get stuck in the mental realm, the fourth dimension. So these two little girls were there, and they explained to me all of this situation. I couldn't believe it. Anyway, I think it was the next night I was at home reading a story to my daughter, and these two little girls appeared at the end of the bed, and they were just staring at me. They were saying, "We need your help." And so anyway, I phoned up my teacher, and I said, "Listen, the two little girls are in the house. What am I supposed to do?" She said, "You better come round again." This was late at night. So I went round, and we put on these big kind of suits, and we went in to the in-between world, and it's really heavy when you go in there. It's like being in a cave. It's black sludge, and it's heavy, and it's like going into a cave where you've got millions of bats, and the bats are like these souls that are stuck. It's very heavy. And we went in these suits of light, and we found the little girls, and we actually took the little girls through, opened up a portal, and we saw the mum on the other side, and we reunited them. And so I learned some really valuable lessons during this. And obviously this man had lost lots of money. His wife and children had committed suicide off the back of it. Ever since I've started this kind of spiritual journey and gone on this different path, we've always been giving back. So every month we give to a charity in Africa. We've been to the Philippines and rebuilt schools and put permaculture projects in place. We've been to Cambodia, and we've rescued children from trafficking. We've again put children's programs in place, stuff for the government there, all sorts of different things, giving back all of the time. But there's also times when I might have lost like a large amount of money on a particular, investment deal. And I know that that is me just paying back some of this debt that I need to be repaid. It's not karma, it's just an energetic transaction. And so like we need our kind of energetic bank levels at equilibrium or above. But when there's a deficit, you're going to have to pay that back at some point. If you owe money to the bank, you got to pay that money back. So I'd owed money to the bank, and so there's been times when it's had to been paid back, and it's been paid in different ways too, not always through money, but different ways that I might have hurt someone. That hurt has come back into my life, and it's so clear when it happens. And I just say thank you. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to kind of remedy this situation. And thank you for this beautiful teaching, because every time it happens, there's a teaching in it, you know, and it's a teaching, it's a lesson for me, because I might not have realized that lesson 10 years ago. But now in this space where my levels of awareness are higher, my consciousness is much more expanded, I'm much more aware of what's going on. So I can say thank you for the lesson, um, and just forgive myself, forgive anyone else involved, and just move on. So yeah, that's how I feel about it.
A lot of people believe that there's ascension that's going to be happening or it's already happening. If you believe in that, what's the best piece of advice you can give us to navigate it?
You know, I think ascension happens on many different levels. So as human beings, our ascension is to return to our center. Like Earth is a school, Earth is a training ground. And there's many reasons that we come to Earth. I mean, number one, there's this construct that we're living and playing, you know, this dualistic perspective of reality out in, which is amazing because we get to have so many different experiences here on Earth that we don't get to have on other planets because of this duality and because of this third dimensional field. Not that it's not on other planets, but it's rife here. And so we get to come here and play that game. We also get to come here because when we come here, we know we're going to get lost. We come out of our mother's womb and into this world, and our memory's blank slated. We've got no memory. Most of us don't have any memory of our past incarnations. So we've got to learn it and remember it all over again and start from Groundhog Day. So to actually come down onto this earth plane, they don't just let anybody in. You know, souls that come here have been training for billions of years. There's a queue of souls waiting to come down here because this is the ultimate test. If you can come down into Earth School and find your way back out again, then you've cracked the code. It's a little bit like Jesus and Mary Magdalene, or Zeus and Mary Magdalene, because Jesus isn't really Jesus, Jesus is Jesus. But if you go back to Jesus's galactic name, which is Sananda, Mary Magdalene, they've been down into this construct, and Mary Magdalene got stuck. She's still stuck here today. Jesus found his way back out again and is still hovering around in the construct, working from afar, sometimes dropping down into the field to do some work, and then sometimes exiting again. But he can't leave this matrix until Mary Magdalene comes with him, because their souls are so intertwined. So people get lost in here, even if you're at a very, very, very high level, because it's so dark and dense. And so we're coming down here to find our way back home, back to our heart, to realize that we're source, that we're frequency, that we're love. We're also coming back down here to activate our original 12-strand template, to access our full superhuman potential, so we can travel in our Merkaba fields, so we can exit through certain stargates in our physical bodies, not just our consciousness. Because you can travel the multiverse, taking your light out of your body, and that's cool. But taking your body with you is a whole different thing. And it's something that we're going to be able to accomplish in this lifetime. The other thing is, we'll be able to switch from one body to another. We don't have to just stay in this one physical avatar. We'll be able to put our body into rejuvenation chambers, just like they had in Lemuria, just like they had in Egypt, just like they had in Atlantis, and switch between avatars. That's another skill set. But all of this stuff we're remembering. And this ascension process is restructuring our own internal mathematics so we can switch on this multidimensional architecture and be our supersonic superhuman selves, these angelic 12-strand humans that we used to be when we lived on a planet called Tara hundreds of million years ago, which is like Mother Earth's higher self. But the crystalline grid wars took place on Tara 2, and Tara exploded, and Earth is a planet that we reincarnated on, but in a lower frequency band, whereas Tara was in a higher dimensional space. But they had an Egypt there, they had an Atlantis there, they had a Lemuria there. But we were 12-strand activated beings, Lyran Syrian humanoids. But here we're a much lesser of a human. And so this ascension process is all of what I've just mentioned. Returning to love, navigating this ascension gateway to get off planet, unifying with our sisters and brothers, and realizing that we're one great big family and we're not here to judge each other. We're not here to ridicule each other, steal from each other, hurt each other. We're here to help each other and grow together and move back into this kind of one love, one heart, one human family, which is our kind of company slogan. You know, we're galactic beings here on this earth plane. And so the best piece of advice that I could give to anyone is to really dive into your own heart. Realize who and what you truly are. That is a multi-dimensional being having a human experience. You're not this physical identity, which is Jerry, I'm 46. I've got a girlfriend. I've got a business called Star Magic, 2 children. You know, I'm here in this hotel room right now from Mexico, communicating with Jeff through the computer. This is all part of the identity, the illusion. It's not really real, even though that it is somewhat. What's real is that we're energy, we're frequency, we're sound, we're vibration. And these bodies are musical instruments that our soul gets to reside inside of. And when you play the right music to these musical instruments, the whole body moves into overdrive. And our internal mathematics realign, all of our multidimensional architecture switches on, and we step into our full power. And within doing that, we harmonize the masculine and the feminine frequencies. We zero point them. We bring all of the light and all of the dark into the 0 point. Most people, or a lot of people, are moving into the light and away from the darkness. It's no good. A lot of people are playing around in the darkness and not in the light. That's no good. If you want to be whole, you've got to embrace your wholeness. And that's all of your shadow aspects. You know, it's all of those deep, dark pieces of you that you don't really want to deal with. You've got to bring all of those in because our power lies in the dark and in the light. So we've got to harness all of that, be in wholeness. And when we move into wholeness, we connect with the fabric of space-time. And naturally, by default, life just flows because we're not separate from anything. So move into your heart, take that deep dive into the labyrinth of your own inner workings and realize how truly powerful you are and that no one external is coming to save you. I mean, we've got a healing business and people come to us all the time and say, heal me, save me. We're not in the business of healing people and saving people. To make it like to cut it straight, like no human being can actually really heal another human being anyway, even though we've got a healing business. What we do is we create an environment so the human being self heals, and when they step into that environment, their body's natural rhythms take over and the self healing takes place. All we do is we put a few things in place to orchestrate that and instigate that.
Jerry, after watching this podcast, people may want to reach out to you and ask you questions. Are you open to that?
Absolutely.
What's the best way to contact you?
If you go to starmagichealing.org, there you're going to get access to email addresses, Instagram, Facebook, all of the social handles. So just reach out. You know, I mean, I'll answer as many as I can. We've also got a huge team, so the team will respond to some people. And yeah, I mean, we get online every single week. So we run a frequency spa on a Monday. We run a weekly meditation on a Wednesday. You can come and join those, you know, connect with me every single week. We do activations, we talk, you know, we just keep ourselves in the right frequency.
Earlier, you mentioned your book. What was the title again?
So I've got a few books. The one that I mentioned earlier was called Into the Light. And then I've got another one called Healing with Light Frequencies, which is all about star magic and how you can use star magic to facilitate healing for yourself or other people. And then I've got Activate Your Superhuman Potential. And Activate Your Superhuman Potential is like a workbook. It's like the ultimate 5D toolkit. So everything from the way that we do qigong to breath work to healing, pineal gland activation, nutrition, everything is in there. Just a whole set of tools for you to be a high frequency being, go through this ascension process and really live a high vibrational lifestyle. And you deserve that.
Well, do you have anything else that you're working on that you want people to know about?
At the moment, we're in the process. There's a couple of really interesting things that we're working on. The first one, in Romania and Transylvania, we're in the process of getting planning permission for our first healing center. So going back several years, when we first started Star Magic, the same blue being, Derek White, that has always been with me ever since, the one that picked me up in the spacecraft, he came to see me and showed me 13 healing centers spread around the Christ consciousness grid of the planet. And he told me I needed to build them. And I said to him, well, if I build them, who's going to work in them? He said, well, you've got to train people. That's the whole reason we started training people to work in these facilities. And we've bought land in various locations to build them. And we're going to get planning permission in the next 6 months for our first one. So in 2025, we'll break ground. And this healing center is built out of the most incredible sacred geometrical code. It's like a load of buildings from another planet. The architects actually downloaded these buildings, and it turns out that the frequency that he downloaded in the buildings is the same frequency that we use in our healings in Star Magic, which is kind of crazy. But everything's designed. If you go to starmagichealing.org and go to the video section, you can see some 3GI models of what it's like. You can go through them. There's flyovers. Actually have a look around and see what these buildings are going to be like. So yeah, that's one thing that is going to be awesome. And so if you're interested in the kind of the big vision and the big mission about helping humanity, come and do our training with a view to working in our healing centers. The other thing that we're doing, which is really kind of cool, which I was telling you about earlier, is we're starting something next year called Aya's House, where we're going to be doing like a plant medicine reality TV show. So I'm not going to say too much more about that at the moment, but it's the reason that I'm here in Mexico at the moment. We're going into the jungle tomorrow to meet the architects and work out exactly where we're going to build it. And by the end of this year, it'll be up and running. And yeah, so it's very, very exciting projects. Both of them are amazing. So I'm just really grateful to have been here and had the opportunity to share with you, Jeff, and your audience. And just thank you to anyone and everyone that's listening. And just so much love, you know?
Thank you. And before you finish up, can you leave us with one last positive message?
You've got this. We've all got this. We're a human family, and every single one of us is powerful. Don't ever bow down to anyone. No one is above you. No one is below you. We're all equal on this planet. And we are sisters and we're brothers. And the only way that we're going to change the game is by coming together. Stop judging other people. Accept other people. You know, this spiritual community is kind of a bit crazy because you see so much judgment and so many people peddling their different ways of doing things. I mean, we peddle our way of doing things, but we're open to integrating and alchemizing with anyone else on planet Earth. And we also know that our way is not the only way. There are so many ways to get in the end result. And if we could just move into a space of harmonization, a space of alchemy, a space of trust, a space of love and compassion and kindness, and realize that we're all the same. No one's here to try and outdo anyone else. We're all here just to make this right, to make this world a beautiful place. So get out of here, get into here, and breathe deeply and just love every single second on this planet. And when you start to live from this space of the heart, you take away that 0.25-second window, because when you're in your head, there's a 0.25-second window between stimulus and response. When you're breathing deeply and you're living in your heart, when things happen in your external environment, there's space. And so you can choose to respond instead of react. And quite often that response is just no response at all. It's just to maintain your equilibrium, keep your heart open, be in love and kindness, and just keep moving, you know, through time and space, and just exuberating that love and that magic and that beautiful vibration.
Jerry, thank you for your message, and thank you for being my guest.
Thank you so much for having me, brother. It's been an absolute pleasure. Very grateful.
Thanks for watching the Jeff Mara podcast. I really appreciate you. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. And if you do, there are loyalty badges and other perks depending on your level of membership. All you need to do is click the join button underneath the video to find out more. Thank you for your support.